Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Tuesday, September 30th. Derek VanRiper, Sarris, Britt Ghiroli here with you. On this episode, we have our full playoff predictions. It's part 2 of the Rates and Barrels MLB playoff preview. The good news is we're about 45 minutes away from first pitch in the Guardians-Tigers matchup as we record this, so we will be ahead of first pitch, even though you will hear this after the first couple of wildcard games have started. So our predictions
should already be looking wrong.
Most likely. I expect us to be more wrong than right by the time people get to hear this. So it's not going to make us
World
look
Series
good.
winner is down 7-0 in game 1 of the wild card series. Looking good.
Yeah. Well, you can control that to some degree. So we'll get to those predictions here in just a few minutes, along with some baseball news you should know. We're also going to have Tim Britton joining us here in about 20 minutes to have an autopsy of the 2025 Mets because they're noticeably absent from this playoff field, which was a pretty big surprise if you watched them throughout the first half of the season. Based on expectations we all had for this club entering the year, we'll figure out where that organization goes from here.
You know what I found out about myself watching the Mets down the stretch? And I said this to somebody, I forget who I said it to, that I was watching a game with, and I said, I root for the people in the middle of a terrible collapse.
You root for people not to go all the way to the rock bottom.
Not to collapse. Yes. Right. I just feel so badly for them. It's like a parental instinct of being like, oh no, don't hurt my child. It's like, oh God, this is going to be so bad. And so I found myself kind of rooting for the Tigers and the Mets and the Astros a little bit down the stretch because I was like, this is not good. This is a collapse of the big C and you're just going to remember it. And it's going to suck. And the fans are going to be so angry about it. And, so it's not like, this is not like a laundry rooting. It's not like a deep rooted rooting. It's just like a little bit of like, oh no, I'm so sorry.
Yep. I understand. I've been on the receiving end of some pretty big collapses as a fan. So I also, as a neutral party, do not want to see the most epic of collapses because it's not fun, right? The world's full of terrible things. We want to have fun with sports. We don't want to have hey, we had a 15-game lead and blew it. We don't want that. That's it's not always good, even though it makes for some good stories. So, Britt, we had a chance to share our wild card breakdown with everybody on our last episode. So if you want to hear about the series that we are about to watch, that's the episode right before this one.
I
think backstage,
I tuned in.
Your predictions for those series is to get them onto the record before those games begin. You said you wanted all 4 underdogs?
I give you all the dogs. Give them
all the dogs.
All of them.
Including the Reds.
Yeah. Big day, guys. I'm feeling crazy, not just because I washed my hair.
All right. All right, there we go.
Here's the thing that's unfortunate for people who are listening and reading and subscribing and fueling our livelihoods. My 3-year-old could probably pick the playoff bracket better than us based off of the mascots. That is just what the MLB playoffs are, right? Like especially now in a 3-game series. Anybody could beat anybody on a 3-game series, and every fan base who has a team in the playoffs is sitting there saying, which team's going to show up? Because every team has looked brilliant and terrible during different parts of the season. So I think I'm going to go all underdogs, mostly because I like to always see upsets in sports. This is what baseball wanted, by the way. They wanted these Cinderellas. They wanted these March Madness. They wanted the chaos when they introduced the 3rd wild card. So, I think that there are some upsets that are a little more likely to happen. Do I think the Reds have it in them to beat the Dodgers? Look, on paper, no. You probably play that series 100 times. The Dodgers win 99. But do they have a chance? Yeah, they do. Especially if they win tonight, right? Like, that's the thing about these 3-game series. How are you feeling if you lose game 1? Today, really, because most of these games are during the day. They start during the day. How do you feel? You do not feel good, right? I think there are scenarios you can talk yourself into every single at least I can. Every single underdog in these wildcard series. Nothing is impossible unless you guys are here to say that something. I just don't see that. You can't tell me now that all of a sudden the Tigers can't beat Cleveland, even though they're technically the lower seed. You can't tell me the Red Sox can't beat the Yankees. You're running out Garrett Crochet. So you can't tell me that's not going to happen, right? Like you look at these series, you look at the Padres, you can't tell me that they can't beat the Cubs. I know the home runs are a factor, but their bullpen is so lights out, and bullpens are a lot of what matters in October. Like, yeah, it's Nick Pivetta, and who knows, and he's really their number one guy. There's question marks everywhere, guys. give me the underdogs because they're a great story, one. And two,
How about?
I just think that you cannot predict how these early rounds are so hard to predict because it doesn't come down to depth, doesn't come down to anything. Remember when it was a one-gamer? And it was like, like
yeah, what are we
a
supposed
ball
to say?
goes through some guy's a ball goes through some guy's legs. Derek knows. All of a sudden, the Nationals go to the World Series. They should have never won the wild card game in 19. So I've seen way too much chaos to sit here and say, oh yeah, all the favorite teams, the better teams are going to advance. That's not how this works.
Just to your point, which I think is a great one, 3-game series. The Reds have won this year. They have won a 3-game series against the Yankees. They swept the Cubs in 4. They won 2 out of 3 in Milwaukee. They won 2 out of 3 against the Phillies. So they have beaten good teams in 3-game series. And yes, they haven't fared that well against the Dodgers this year. But if we had a 3-game series this year in the middle of the year of Reds against Dodgers and the Reds won 2, nobody would say that the world had changed or that, oh my God, look at this result. It'd just be like, okay.
I know. So, maybe I'm not right on all of them. I don't expect to be right on all of them, but 2? Definitely doable. 50%, that's about what our experts always get, isn't it? Like, isn't that how this works?
Yeah,
right?
I thought it was interesting. So the Staff Picks article on the site, World Series winner, apparently Phillies-Mariners. Like, there's just a lot backing those two teams. 44% of the staff has the Phillies winning the whole thing. 36% have the Mariners, 12% on the Dodgers, 8% on the Yankees. 8 other teams did not receive a single vote in staff picks.
By the way, I've changed my vote since I put in my staff picks. So my vote,
here we go.
I've got a vote for yes. Here we go.
Did you take one of the zeros?
The other strategy is spam picks. I'm picking one of the 0%ers today.
Are you? Okay. Well, that's good to know. So you should put your waffle crown back on as the King of Waffles.
Can we make him one? Because if you pick every team to win, you're going to be right somewhere.
Yeah, you can do short form video where you make a different pick. You do long form video for the show.
Go on some radio shows.
Yeah. Go to each local market. Get 12 radio hits between now and tomorrow for every playoff team, and just pander to the local base and just be like, yeah.
I think the Reds are going to win it all.
I think the Brewers are doing it, and the people on WTMJ be like, yeah, we like this guy. Bring this nerd on more often.
Yeah.
Seems like a good idea to me. All right. Well, let's just get right into the predictions. We'll fold some news in along the way. Britt, with all of the underdogs that you put through in the wild card round, where do we go from there? How do you start to put the rest of your bracket together?
Okay, I still do have. My name is Brittany, and I am one of those people who voted for the Mariners and the Phillies. I didn't know everyone was going to. Look, the dogs can make it at round 2, but that doesn't mean that they're going to go all the way, guys. I'm not insane. Though, actually, that's a joke because wildcard teams make it to the World Series all the time, so it wouldn't be that crazy.
True
It really wouldn't. It really wouldn't at all. I just picked the World Series matchup that I thought made the most sense. I picked the best team that I thought top to bottom, NL, the best team, AL. Is that going to happen? Probably not, because it almost never happens. So, last year we had Yankees, Dodgers. That was 2 big markets, 2 good teams. Like, will we get it again?
Probably. That was chalk. That was pretty chalky.
Yeah, exactly, right? So, I mean, it could happen again. How my brackets go from there is I really like Seattle and I really like Toronto. And I see them. I'm sorry. I get a lot of boredom after round 1. I see a lot of these favorites kind of advancing. The reason I like the Phillies over the Dodgers is I just think that the Phillies have, I know you can't quantify this, but they have dudes there who I've seen it. I've been at those games. Like, I've seen Citizens Bank Park shake. They have the crowd, which is actually a really scary place to go play as a visiting player in Philadelphia. And they have these guys like Harper and Schwarber who have a propensity for big moments. And I don't think you can quantify that. So I think they're a dangerous team because, they are a very talented team. A to Z, you look at all their aspects, they don't have a whole lot of weaknesses. Yeah, they miss Zach Wheeler. Yeah, there's things we can nitpick at. Is Trey Turner going to be healthy? I know he's back now, but is he going to be Trey Turner? They certainly need him. But I think this is a team that is very good, has the veteran experience, which matters in the postseason. Like the moments can speed up so quickly. I've seen it happen to teams where, you look at the Padres last year, like how'd they lose that series to the Dodgers, right? The ball can turn so quickly another way. I think the Phillies have guys that won't allow that to happen. So I like them. I like Seattle because I think this is the best lineup they've probably had since the last time they made it to the ALCS, 20 plus years ago. They finally figured out the lineup, and now the rotation is a little iffy. I'd like to know what's going on with Wu. I know he's day-to-day. That really matters, I think, too. But I think when you look at the American League, they're the most balanced team. Everyone picking the Yankees. I got to see Aaron Judge do what Aaron Judge does during the regular season in October. And if Aaron Judge is going to be what he's been in playoffs past, the Yankees don't have a chance to make it out of the AL. Not in my mind.
I helped with a Chris Kirshner piece about Aaron Judge, just as an aside. He's saying all the right things. He's had good postseasons in the past, so I think it's in there. He's also, one of the 2 or 3 best hitters of our time. So I think he can do it. But it was interesting to me to find that, pitchers are better in the postseason. They're better at hitting up and in on him. They're making he's trying to make contact further out in front. He's swinging more, so he's pressing a little bit in the postseason, and they're dropping twice as many curveballs on him, so they're using his aggressiveness against him, and that's why his strikeout rate is higher in the postseason. So, at some point he has to figure out how to calm down in the postseason while everyone's telling him, gosh, you're terrible in the postseason. And all the radio is like, what's Aaron Judge going to do? And you get questions and pressers about like, what do you think about your struggles in the postseason? It's like, So somehow he has to figure out how to calm that down. But I think that you're right that this is the most complete Mariners team. And I keep advancing them. I have them advancing all the way to the ALCS just because I think whoever comes out of Tigers Guardians, it's been a fun story for all year long, but whoever comes out of that, I think, is an inferior team to the Seattle Mariners,
Mm-hmm.
And, when they come and they face that Mariners rotation with that Mariners bullpen and then the 2 stars plus better role players with power, I think the Mariners will advance to the ALCS. The only reason, and so I've been like thinking about narrative and like, what's the story that we're going to tell of this postseason, and I've decided that I'm going to pre-write this narrative. And anybody who's written in a press box knows about pre-writing, like having the story written for a game as it's going, and that once you have a great story and it's all written, then there's a tie in the 9th and it goes to extra innings and your story is kaput. But my pre-written narrative on this postseason is going to be that contact matters. And so that is the only place where I see the Mariners having a little bit of an Achilles heel. Yeah, and that's why I have the Jays passing the Mariners. And
I like that.
I'm going to have, that's a little bit of a preview of the World Series I've got, because I'm going to have the contact rate World Series. And that means who's the other team that's going to be in there with the Jays? That's right. It's the Padres.
It's a good pick. Their lack of power gives me a little bit of a pause, though.
But I'm just I'm saying Manny gets on fire and helps them like undo some of that. Yeah, it has to be a Manny, Tatis, Merrill kind of, they're the power sources, especially with Laureano hurt. And so there has to be a power source. I'm not saying that, they can do it with all singles, but I just like, there has been research in the past that's just shown that team strikeout rate is slightly more predictive in the playoffs than it is in the regular season. And I think that's because you're facing really good pitchers and you can't always rely on the homer, so like, just being able to stick with it and put some balls in play. So I have the Padres over the Phillies in the NLCS, and then the Padres Jays World Series.
A Padres Jays World Series. Okay.
You convinced me.
But you were not bold enough to put that in print.
Yeah, the receipt will still exist on this show, but it's a lot harder to search for it.
Yeah, that's right.
I see what you did there. I do think.
No, I mean, honestly, when we are asked for picks like a lot, and I just don't know how much time to spend on it. Like I just don't know, because it's like, you could spend a really long time and really parse all the way down, and then you'll probably pick a lot of chalk, because that's whatever you're looking at, they'll be better. Like the better teams will be better at it, right? And then you just know if you pick a lot of chalk, it's just not going to go that way. Except for last year, I guess you could have just picked chalk last year.
Yeah.
I like the Padres pick, but every time I pick them, they let me down. I feel like they've always been a trendy pick the last couple of years, right?
Right. So this is like the post-hype sleeper.
I thought the original pick I had going into the season was an Orioles-Rays ALCS.
Crush it.
I thought the Orioles were a post-hype sleeper in a similar vein. So I'm going to be careful with post-hype sleepers, because they did not treat me well earlier in the season. I do think that Mariners team, like, it is a fun balance of does damage and steals bases, but does have that elevated swing and miss, and just how much that swing and miss is present once we get to the DS round is going to be really important toward dictating what happens. It's so funny that I think you both have the chalk coming out of the AL, the teams on bye, even though there's some chaos in the shorter series. So that's pretty exciting. I also had the Britt Phillies-Mariners combo. I didn't know the stat picks were going to turn out that way. And I saw it. I saw it and I was like, I immediately want to just change everything, because we're clearly, as Eno said, we're looking through similar lenses, right? We're looking at similar qualities, similar things. For the Phillies, I think it's that we've seen them make deep runs with this core before. They have that combination of experience. They bolstered the bullpen at the trade deadline. They bolstered the position player core at the trade deadline. Britt, you mentioned the Trey Turner injury. That could be a big one for them, but they got him back right at the end of the regular season. So I think they're mostly healthy in that group. And for a team that lost Zach Wheeler, we talked about this with Matt Gelb a couple of weeks ago, they still have quality in that rotation. It's still a good playoff caliber rotation that holds up well against just about any team that they're going to face. And I think the way I saw it maybe shaking out was I see a Phillies Brewers NLCS. Like I think the Phillies are going to get rid of the Dodgers in the DS round. And I think part of it is that I believe that those Phillies bats can take advantage of the vulnerability in the Dodgers bullpen in particular. I think they have the right types of hitters to actually turn that
and good enough hitters
weakness
to maybe get a hit off
starters.
The early guys.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean they're really good hitters. So
yeah, I just think that's one of those spots where if you see the weakness in this Dodgers team, that's a tough second round matchup for the Dodgers if they're able to get through the short series with the Reds. And I just feel like I want to see something different. We haven't seen the Mariners in a World Series before, too. So I think that's maybe part of all of this for many of us. We're like, hey, we've never seen Seattle play for a World Series. But I think it's heartbreak again in Milwaukee, unfortunately, in that LCS round. I think well-built, well-run, well-coached team, and I think it could be a really well-fought 6-7 game series in the NLCS between the Brewers and Phillies. I think the tougher series for me, I had the Yankees getting through the wild card round. Yankees-Jays is a really tough prediction for me. Like I think as much as we talk about the Jays as a team that has quality in the rotation behind Gausman, it's still a lot of uncertainty, and it's a bullpen that isn't quite as deep as some of the other top-end bullpens. So I just think there's a slight middle inning vulnerability that a lineup as deep as the Yankees can exploit. Much like I see that Phillies-Dodgers matchup, I think that's where the Jays might come up just a little bit short in that matchup.
So you're putting the Yankees back in the World Series?
No, I'm putting the Yankees in the LCS, but I have the Mariners beating the Yankees in the LCS on the AL side.
All right.
And I do have the Phillies in 6, winning the whole thing.
I mean,
so you have Yankees, Phillies, and 09?
No, Mariners.
Oh, Mariners. Right.
Phillies.
You're right.
Yeah.
Mariners, Phillies. Okay. So you're the same boat that everyone else is. They didn't tell you, as will attest, when you went to the Google Doc, they weren't like, this is the percentage. I wasn't like trying to go with the crowd. I actually, like you guys said, would have probably gone elsewhere, because now it's just like, my God, everyone. The problem is, as I said earlier on the show, we're all trying to pick the best teams, the teams that make the most sense, and none of this is going to make any sense. So Eno's contact thing probably is a better play. I should probably, again, go off of which team's colors I like the best, because like that's
just pick something.
literally how it works here. You know, like I think we're laughing about the Reds, but let's not forget the Texas Rangers, the year they won the World Series, blew the division, backed in, played terrible down the stretch. We're a wild card team that had no relievers, and we're like, they can't go anywhere. They've got no bullpen, right?
Yeah.
And then they won the World Series. So we sit here and we dissect these things, and we're like, this can't happen. There is a path for every single team to get there.
That's
you
true.
just got to get hot.
When
Cleveland,
I looked at all the
struggle, but
I do actually. Yes, I think that you need a lineup. I think you need a really good lineup. I think
their
we looked at it.
So low.
We looked at it and we found one below average lineup that had won a World Series. It was I brought this up before, but it's the Braves when they had the Hall of Fame rotation. You know, so I usually want to bet on a team with a lineup, but other than the Guardians, everybody's got an above average lineup, even the Brewers.
They do.
I know they've done good work.
They've been good all year. They're a good balanced team. Like it's not an insane pick to pick the Brewers to make the run and win the World Series.
No, not
they're
at all.
good enough. They're built to do it.
I looked at the other things, like the things that people say, like defense wins championship. Found no evidence of that.
They say that in every single sport. Every single sport, defense wins
pitching
championships.
and defense. Yeah, I looked at pitching. No, the only thing that I found was this lineup thing. Lineup matters. Contact matters a little bit more than usual. And I even looked at stars. They're like stars win you championship, and I couldn't find anything there. So, basically we can tell any story, and I do think that's funny because we look at these flaws and we say, okay, I do think Jay's pitching is a bit of a flaw, but then when we have examples just 2 years ago, as Britt pointed out, where you're like, whose staff would you take, that Ranger staff or this Jays staff? And I think I'm taking this Jays staff over that Ranger staff.
And the Jays can do kind of what the Nationals did and what other teams have done is you can put your starters in the pen. I wouldn't be surprised if you see Max Scherzer coming blowing out of there and throwing.
I think Scherzer would be my pen guy.
Yeah. Like, so your pen this time of year, and we do this same thing with like these teams that were like, oh, the rotation's a little thin. In the playoffs, you go through that lineup twice, and that's it. No one's letting these guys go deep unless you have a Scooble or a Crochet, right? Like no one is letting these pitchers go deep. So it's a different game almost than it
really is
during the regular season. It's
a little bit weird. And in fact, they should maybe, I don't know if there's need to have rules or like change the schedule a little bit. It gets a little bit more real baseball, like in the long series, deeper in the in the 7-game series, because then you don't have as many rest days in between, and like you can't just play your relievers all the time. But there is a weird thing that like we watch this baseball all year, and then we watch a different brand of baseball in October. And I do think that the Padres staff, that's that sort of deal. Like, oh, did Dylan Cease have a lot of problems in the 5th and 6th inning? Do you think Dylan Cease will see the 5th and 6th inning in October?
Exactly. Exactly.
He's their 4-inning opener.
Guys. Yes. Yeah. Like you saw AJ Hinch do Scooble and pitching chaos last year, right? And they were able to beat Houston, and they have a little bit better pitching chaos this year. So like you can do it. You could win, and that's the problem, right? You look at the last 5, or this actually be a good story, like the last 5 World Series winners, they're totally different teams. They won in different ways. There's no formula, and this is what confounds executives, right? Like you don't know if your team's going to have the momentum, first off. There's no way to quantify that. And also, like you said, there's no correlation between a really great pitching staff or really great stars or really great defense. There's not this exactly. So you're left being like, look at the last 5, 10 World Series winners.
I think it does explain what we've seen across baseball, which is the strategy is just get in, baby. Just get in.
That's how the Reds
And what we
feel.
saw this year, no 100-win teams this year.
Mm-hmm.
Just get in. It wasn't like I need to build this behemoth that is going to win 110 and steamroll over the playoffs. It was like, hey, I need to win. I have a 92-win team. That's pretty good. It may have some flaw somewhere, and just get in and do it again next year. So
yes,
I think that has affected the way people think about things.
Yeah, I think so too. One thing we need from you real quick, I don't know if you actually said who you have winning the World Series. Britt and I both have the Phillies. You put the Padres and Jays in it. Who comes out on top?
I say the Padres get the monkey out their back. We're going to have to write a bunch of AJ Preller puff pieces, which I'm not saying your piece was a puff piece, but it was a preview to the puff piece. The catch-up, the hooping, that was a good setup, and you're going to have to do part 2, Britt. You're going to have to do part 2.
The whole premise of that basically was I just think he's the weirdest guy in baseball. And I said to Dennis, the Padres beat writer, I said, why is no one writing this? Like, I know we've heard bits and pieces, but like, let's put it in one story that like this guy, like I had a former employee that said, listen, I can guarantee you that no one's running their team the way the Padres run their team, right? Like it's just, he's just eccentric. And he's polarizing, and there are certainly flaws to that strategy. And I think if they don't make a deep run,
3 a.m. phone calls, and
right, there may be some heat on him. I think if they go to the World Series, then you're probably looking at an extension for AJ Preller, who's only signed through next year.
Well, so then he has to also get out of the mess he's created. Yes. I also think this is like one of the last chances for this Padres team to win the World Series, because those $300 million contracts. Whoo, baby, man. You know how hard it is to trade away $10, $15 million of dead money? You don't trade away $100 million of dead money. That does not happen.
No.
Well, as we learned over the course of this season, money doesn't just immediately solve all of your problems. And to discuss that, we brought on Tim Britton, one of our great Mets beat writers here at The Athletic. Tim, before we get into the Mets, your World Series prediction. We haven't had the first pitch of the first game yet. This still counts.
Oh, man, you just threw that at me. I think I'm going to pretend that I didn't hear the part where you said 2 of you already picked the Phillies. So I'm going to be novel, and I'm going to pick the Phillies in 6 over the Yankees.
Phillies over Yankees in 6. All right. I think baseball would be happy with that. That'd be a good
Manfred's
matchup,
all right
too.
with that one.
2009 rematch.
Yep, absolutely.
Yes, yeah.
All right, well, let's dig into this Mets team, notably absent from the postseason this year. Not exactly what we expected. Last time you were on the show, Mets fans were excited because they started playing better. They attributed your appearance on Rates and Barrels to the Mets turnaround. And then, fortunately, they have not come back to blame us for everything that happened in the weeks after that. David Stearns had a chance to talk to the media yesterday. And where do you even begin to point fingers or what do you point to first when you say this was the main reason why this team collapsed over the second half of this season?
I think there's plenty of blame to go around. We don't have to leave anyone out of that picture, fortunately for Mets fans. But I think, you start with the pitching staff, and Stearns was very clear. He called it more run prevention, which ties the defense in, because I think the thing that surprised them most was how bad the defense was in the final 4 to 6 weeks of the season. This is a team that made 19 errors in its last 29 games of the year. And their errors capture some of your bad defense, but they don't capture even half of it. And it was worse than that. So I think like the defense was a bad mix for most of the season, but especially so toward the end of the year. Then from the pitching staff's perspective, the crucial things that didn't come together was that Kodai Senga and Sean Manaea, the guys who were here to be number 1 and number 2 basically at the start of the year. Senga was really good for 2.5 months. He gets hurt and never really, comes back pretty quickly, but never finds his mechanics, gets sent to the minor leagues in September. Manaea is hurt for the first 3 months of the season. He comes back and never has it. As Stern said on Monday, Sean Manaea's season never got going, basically. You look at those guys, I think Senga's ERA, once he came back, was 5.9. And Manaea's ERA for the season was 5.7 or something like that. So you got to the point where down the stretch of the season, those guys were worse options for you than the guys you had in AAA in Sproat and Jonah Tong. And that made such a difficult pitching mix for them to piece together at a time when there's no stopper in that rotation. Maybe Nolan McLean filled that role for 6 weeks for them, but outside of that, there was no one who you could send to the mound and say, "Go win us a game today." Those were the guys who were supposed to be doing that, and instead they were giving them really nothing.
I find this fascinating though, because there's a lot of excitement. Tell me if I'm wrong. There's a lot of excitement about these young pitchers There's a lot of excitement about the Mets as a starting pitching factory, like getting better at turning. They traded away some pitchers, like they were able to create a surplus a little bit. So there's some excitement about pitching development. I have seen some anger focused on Jeremy Hefner, but before the season, I think people would have put him in among one of the better pitching coaches in there. So maybe it's just that, I'm predisposed to liking the pitching plan generally. I also like the idea of like, hey, we're going to buy some veterans and we're going to have some young guys that come up when the veterans get hurt or fall back or whatever it is. So overall, the pitching plan seemed okay. Was it just missing that, like, the Stearns touch of like, there should have been like an ace in here? Like, there should have been like a more, I've heard the idea that he should have shot more at the top of the market than the middle of the market. Was there something to that when it comes to pitching staff, you think?
Well, certainly in retrospect, you would have said, man, if this team had Max Fried at the top of its rotation, it's different. Of course, they could have also gone and gotten Corbin Burns, in which case it's not different at this point in the season.
Yeah, right.
So I think, the thing, when you look back at it, the thing that maybe you say was missing was there was no guy that you said you thought was going to roll out of bed and throw 180 innings for you. Because, you're the guys you were counting on were Senga, who was coming off basically a lost season, Manaea, who was injury prone earlier in his career and had just finished his best season, but had thrown a lot more innings than he had the year before. Manaea topped 200 innings last year at the postseason. You let Luis Severino and Jose Quintana go, and David Peterson led them in innings over the course of the season and was on the All-Star team, but I think showed some signs of fatigue in the second half of the season. He was a guy who didn't throw a full season last year either. Clay Holmes did, I think, far exceeded what you could have expected out of him, and a guy that threw 165 innings at a 3.5 ERA. Like he's ninth in ERA among qualified starters in the National League, but that's more than you could have thought you'd get out of him. So there wasn't that guy that could stop the 7-game losing streak for them, who would eat innings for them and be reliable. I don't know who that would have been in the offseason. I have to go back and look to say, okay, who should they have kept? Who should they have brought in to be that guy, even if it's not a Burns or a Fried? Or who should they have gotten at the trade deadline? Is it does Merrill Kelly make the big difference for this team, even if it means they move one of those starting pitching prospects? And I think those are things they're thinking about now, but thought at the time that in late July that Senga and Manaea were going to be those stabilizing forces that they just never became.
Yeah, it's so hard now, as you said, Tim, because last year at the deadline, it's not like they made these huge blockbuster moves under Stearns. They just seemed to kind of be a team that caught fire at the right time, and you kind of rode that into the playoffs. And you and Will Salmon had a great story up, I thought, about kind of the inner workings of the clubhouse and maybe how that relates to this Mets team. Could you dive into that a little bit? And if you think that that's something that is easily fixable?
Yeah, I think the big difference people will point out between last year's team and this year's team. Actually, one player told us that if you look on paper, like the 2025 Mets are better than the 2024 Mets, and he said it's not even close. But obviously, they won 6 fewer games in the regular season, didn't perform the same way, and so a lot of people will point to like what's off about the mix. Is there something different in the clubhouse? Last year's team had such a magic to it. You had Jose Iglesias and OMG. You had fans onto the Grimace era Mets. There were a lot of different totems for them that represented that season, and they knew they weren't going to be able to concoct that out of nothing this year. They weren't going to be able to just create that same dynamic. It needs to happen organically, and it didn't. And I don't think that means it was a bad clubhouse. It just means that the 2024 clubhouse was a really good one, and they couldn't live up to that standard. So we talked to a lot of players, a lot of people around the organization. Like, was the clubhouse a problem? Does that need to be fixed? And what we heard almost unanimously was no, that it was a different clubhouse. It was always going to be a different clubhouse. And that's not a problem. But it does mean that, there are maybe some pieces that could have been, that could have helped here and there. Some people talked about, energy guys that bring that kind of daily intensity. And some of the guys they had there for that purpose, either got hurt or underperformed. Jesse Winker played 2 games after May 4th. He's a guy who brought that edge when they acquired him last trade deadline. Jose Siri is a guy who brings that energy. He got hurt in the middle of April and missed 5 months. Francisco Alvarez is a guy who's always intense, always brings a smile and energy in the clubhouse. He missed the first month of the season. He was really bad for 2 months, then then went down to the minors. And then, when he came back, he was that guy, but it was too late in the season. So I think, Stearns was pretty clear even last season. You don't create a clubhouse mix. You just kind of roll the ball and let it happen. and it didn't happen this year the way it did last year. I don't know that there's a way they go out this offseason. You know, they're not going to go out and say, okay, what we need to do is sign Jose Iglesias back. Like that's what we need for this roster. But you know, finding the pieces that fit. Stearns is talking about like a roster that fits together better, and I think he largely means on the field, but off the field too, where the personalities mesh maybe in a different way.
Yeah, and I don't think that was meant to be any sort of like negative about the addition of Juan Soto, right? I think you and Will wrote about this. Like, there's a different leadership style between Soto and Lindor and how they go about their business day to day. Not that they clash, but it's just a change from a year ago. And the season Soto just had, you're like, come on, man. Like, he obviously helped. Like, he's a big part of the reason why things were as close as they were at the end of the season. So I'm kind of curious to see how the new pieces fit together here too. Pete Alonso exercised his opt-out, and thinking about the points of emphasis, defense and how the roster fits together, Alonso going to be looking for a longer deal and likely is going to spend a lot of that deal as a DH. Do you think it's as likely this time around that he ends up with the Mets again as it was this time a year ago?
It's probably less likely, just in terms of like, you just think of the end of the season momentum going into the winter. You know, last year you had Alonso saving the season with that 3-run opposite field home run in Milwaukee in the wild card series, and carrying that into a really excellent postseason that he had, one that kind of reiterates his value to a lineup, especially in big moments. And then this year you had, they still had a better offensive season overall, and still finished strong offensively. He had a bunch of home runs in September. Became the franchise's all-time home run leader. But his defense really took a step back this year. He really struggled with throws to first base, kind of throws to pitchers. We saw that, at one point it cost them the game, the winning run scored on it. Another time it got Kodai Senga hurt in June, which was really, I think if you think about it narratively, the turning point of the season was a bad Pete Alonso throw to first base. So I think, if they wanted, if they could come to terms on something where I think Alonso probably spends more time at DH starting next season than he has in the past. I think he spent 3 games there this year. So he plays every day, generally plays every day at first base. I think if they're going to come to an agreement here, it probably involves an understanding that he's going to be the designated hitter more than he has been, if not the majority of the time. I don't know. I haven't looked at like what other teams would be out there willing to give him a 5 or 6 year deal. My thought process is that the Mets would not be one of them at that length. They would want something shorter in the 3 or 4 year range.
Because Soto is going to be a DH at some point over that.
Yeah, I mean, like you look at their defense, Soto probably needs to be a DH at some point. Brandon Nimmo took a big step back in left field. Maybe he needs to move either down the defensive spectrum or into the DH spot as well. So they've got a lot of moving pieces in terms of how to think about this roster coming together as they incorporate some younger players coming up, and what they want to do to sustain this offense while improving themselves defensively. Yeah,
I guess that's my last question is just, I think one of the hardest things I've watched this here in San Francisco where you have a kind of an aging team or a team that's built a little bit more in free agency. You have a really hard time improving defense. They go and sign Jung-Hoo Lee to be their center fielder, and now there's already talk in San Francisco of be like, well, maybe he's be better in a corner. And that was someone where it was one of those unique opportunities to buy someone who's younger than a normal free agent because he's coming from Korea, And so the problem with trying to improve defense in free agency always is that you're getting somebody who's 26, 27, 28, like post-peak defensively. And so, when I look at this team, Juan Soto probably not going to get better defensively going forward unless he maybe dedicates himself to this offseason. But even then, it'd just be a slight improvement. Pete Alonso, you could let him go. Mark Vientos is a liability on defense, but maybe if you're just playing him at first or DH, it's not as bad. The other places you can improve are Beatty, but the real pain point is center field. And the center fielders that are available are Cedric Mullins, Harrison Bader. What's the plan in center? Like, what is the plan to get better? Like, when you look around, do you see, is it Carson Benji? Like, is he a really good center fielder? Do they just give him the ball because they're like, hey, you're going to be a great defensive center fielder and the bat will come when it comes? I mean, how do they improve the defense other than letting Alonso go?
Yeah, so there was a scout who told me way back in, I want to say like May, who said, what's the deal with this team? All of their best hitters can't play defense and vice versa. Like that was the problem. In center, they've got, Tyrone Taylor is under team control for next year. Jose Siri, who they DFA'd, was still outright at the minors. He's under team control for next year. Those guys could be stopgap solutions with a defensive, from a defensive standpoint. Benj is a guy who played center field more this year. When they drafted him last summer, he was a guy who did not play much center in college at Oklahoma State. So they've kind of transitioned him to center. He's not there yet, but he finished the season in AAA. The bat looked really good. I mean, this is a guy who's probably going to be at least a top 50 prospect in the sport, maybe top 10 or top 20 for a lot of outlets going into next season. So a guy who's probably going to help the 2026 Mets. But I'm not sure if he's going to be, slightly below average in center, maybe average in center. I think it's probably too much to expect him to be a plus center fielder
he's
right
not
away.
the solution defensively and offensively. Yeah.
Right. They've got some guys behind him, a level behind him, Nick Morbido, and especially AJ Ewing, a guy who had a huge year for them, kind of their biggest pop-up prospect this past season, who they think might be able to be plus center fielders and kind of the long-term solution if you're gaming it out 27, 28, 29. But in 26, maybe it's Benj there. It's Jet Williams coming up and being your everyday second baseman as probably a slightly above average to maybe plus defender there. Where Jeff McNeil fits in the picture, whether he's part of the picture or not, that's another question. So they've got some different things they can do. But like you said, you're not signing a guy in free agency to be a center fielder for more than a year or two. And the Mets, one of the reasons they're in this mix is they signed Nimmo to an 8-year deal after 2022 with the idea he'd probably be in center for longer than just the one season he was there. And now already 3 years into that deal, you're wondering how much longer can he be even your left fielder on a regular basis.
Yeah, I mean that's what happens when you look at the free agent market. You're like, oh, Bo Bichette, shortstop. Yeah, for how much longer? Maybe not even in year one.
Yeah, Tim. So I agree with the move to bring back Carlos Mendoza, but it seems like when teams have this like historic meltdown like this, there always are changes. Like, do you expect changes to Mendoza's staff at all? And is the plan still? I would assume they would take a harder look at Stearns adding a GM under him and kind of filling out that front office this winter as well, right? Like, are those things that are kind of expected maybe to happen?
So on the coaching staff side of things, yeah, I think the read we got, Will and I, toward the end of the season was if the axe was going to fall, it was probably going to fall somewhere on the coaching staff. Mendoza's coming back. We've seen, look, I covered the 2011 Red Sox when they had their historic September collapse, and that was a full clean house. Like, Theo Epstein left. Terry Francona was fired. They let go of the coaching staff did stay because they brought in Bobby Valentine 2 months later. And that was an overreaction that did not work, to put it mildly. The 07 Mets kept Willie Randolph, but then, fired him halfway through the next season. So I think, Mendoza is back for 26. The coaching staff, they've got, you mentioned Jeremy Hefner earlier, the pitching coach, Jeremy Barnes and Eric Chavez, the co-hitting coaches, have drawn a lot of ire from the fan base, even though the offense is probably the part of the team that still ended as its strength over the course of the season. Maybe the infield coach, outfield coach come under fire with how the defense played. So I don't know that there's any coach I say right now, like, oh, I know he's going to be back. So I think they're evaluating that. And Stearns said they're evaluating it maybe more intensely than they would under normal circumstances. When it comes to the GM, Stearns kind of, he kind of dismissed that idea yesterday. He said basically, like, if the perfect candidate shows up, like, we're happy to hire him, but it's not something they're going to do a robust search for. So I think they're comfortable with kind of where the front office is with him, with assistant GM Eduardo Brizuela, with Andy Green as their farm director. They feel like they've got a good thing going in terms of what they're doing with player development. So at least at this point, I would probably say they're not going to hire a GM this winter.
You get the sense, just based on the way Steve Cohen wants to run things, that this may be the last time for a while we're having a conversation like this as the playoffs begin, with the Mets on the outside looking in. Tim, we appreciate your time and your insight. We look forward to catching up with you again later on this winter.
Oh, anytime. Thanks for having me.
It's Tim Britton, one of our great Mets beat writers here at The Athletic. Be sure to give his stuff a read. Lots going on with this Mets team, even though they did not make it to the postseason. All right, a few news and notes here before we go. Just a couple things I noticed. Chase DeLauter could make his big league debut in the playoffs. Always fun to see prospects do that. It doesn't happen very often. The Twins did it with Alex Kirilloff a couple of years ago. Adalberto Mondesi did it with the Royals, I think back in 2015. And the weird thing about it with DeLauder, he's been hurt since July. So it's not like he had a normal finish.
Did he not get back
season.
into games first?
No.
Whoa.
So it'd be a very unusual debut, but he's on the actual roster for the wild card series. So
Yeah.
we could see that maybe in a pinch hitting situation or something at least.
Yeah.
I heard it explained as he's on the taxi squad.
No.
Initially,
he
they were going
was.
to put him on there,
Yes.
but they put him on the actual roster.
Him and the catcher they brought up as like just in case guys to practice yesterday with the idea that maybe they'd be added, and they did add him. He'd be the 6th, I think, guy ever to debut during the postseason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How are you ready? How are you warm? I mean, just on that topic, when
we talked about their lineup, though, they need help.
I'd be excited, but like, we talk about people being cold. The guys. I don't know if that's the pre-narrative. This year or in the past has been. All the buys, all the guys on buys, all the teams on buys are on. Get cold. I just saw a cool little note about the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays are selling tickets to intra-squad scrimmages with the Buffalo Bisons. So that's how they're staying warm. They're going to play actual games. And what I love about this is putting fans in the seats, because you ask any player, that heightens the level of intensity. So that's going to bring this to another level to have fans in the seats. So I kind of like the idea of bringing people to watch them.
And to be accurate, the tickets are $10 and they're going to charity.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's not like they're
charity.
making a ton
So
of
it's
money
not
off
like,
it. This is about,
I just want to make sure everyone's clear. Yeah, it's about the atmosphere.
They're not
it's actually a
selling
really cool idea.
Field level seats aren't $125 or anything. Like it's just $10 to get
really
in. Okay.
Cool.
$1 beers, $1 hot dogs. Yeah. Why not?
I didn't hear anything about what concessions are open. Hopefully
I don't know. I got the release. It doesn't say anything about the concessions.
Otherwise, you got
select
to bring
concessions.
a sandwich.
I wonder how
rowdy.
rowdy can you make a midweek intra-squad scrimmage with $1 beers in Toronto? Can we
first
find
come,
out?
first served, which is so cool though, because if you're like a family and you've got little kids, like they could sit 100 level for $10.
That's like Fall League. Fall League, you walk up, it's like, I don't know, maybe $9 or $10 for a ticket now, but general admission.
That's how spring training should be, I think.
Well, that ship sailed. We're not going back down that road again. Here's one for you guys. Michael King is going to work in relief during the wild card series. So they're going to go Pivetta in game 1, which is already pretty much underway if you're listening. Dylan Cease, Yu Darvish, game 2, game 3, if it goes that far against the Cubs. Because King threw 49 pitches in his most recent start on Saturday, and that would put him on track to be ready to start in the NLDS. But I've been worried that Michael King just hasn't looked right at various points in the second half. Are my eyes deceiving me?
Not at all. I took a look at his game log. Before the injury, he had a 102 stuff plus and a 104 location plus. After the injury, that's down to 98 stuff plus, 93 location plus. He's lost a full inch of ride on the fastball since his latest injury. So I think, one of the things that's unique about Michael King is that he raises his arm slot a little bit to throw the four seam, and that gives him a bunch of separation on his four seam and his sinker, more so than other sinker sweeper guys like Clark Schmidt and Will Warren, other guys who come to the Yankees. He has a better four-seam fastball because he sort of reaches up to get it. If there is something still hurting him in the shoulder, or if there's something about his legs that doesn't allow him to do that, whatever it is, he has not gotten his four-seam back since that injury. And so maybe the idea is working in relief. He can out-velo some of these concerns, get a little bit of a velo tick, and then also avoid lefties. Then you can make him more of a guy who faces righties. Be careful about what lefties he sees, because then the sinker sweeper combination is so devastating against righties.
Yeah, I think that's going to be key for Michael King getting back on track. I saw a note that Lucas Giolito is not on the wild card roster for the Red Sox due to an elbow injury. That becomes a problem sometime around game 3 of that series. The Red Sox, at least up to this point, did not provide any hints as to who they would use in that spot. I think our guess would be Connolly early. a favorite
But
here on the
also,
pod.
I think some Peyton Tolley, I'm hoping he made the roster now that I said that. But like, I would put him on the roster because he throws hard, and the problem hasn't been a little bit of length and command. So I think if you had Connolly early and then Peyton Tolley came out after him, that would be a very different collection of looks right there.
Peyton Tolley is on the roster, just to confirm.
So I think you can get through 4 or 5 with that pretty well. Keep it down to 1 or 2 runs through 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how young pitching pushed into these important roles holds up. I mean, we talked about the Jays earlier. Trey Savage is important for them. I think Connolly early becomes important for the Red Sox. We've seen a lot of Cam Schlittler this year for the Yankees. Clearly, he's important to them because if that series gets to a third game, it's going to be Schlittler over Luis Gil and Will Warren as the starter there. But he'll pitch the regular season finale on Sunday. I think it gives us more of an indication that they like Schlittler more than Warren at this point, though, if you're trying to understand the hierarchy of how the Yankees are tiering their own starting pitching.
Yeah, he's a legit number 3. And I think for a while, you went into this, at least, a couple months ago. It's like, okay, who pitches game 3 for the Yankees, right? And now it's like, no, we want this guy on the mound for our to be our number 3 guy. And that just shows you kind of, one, how well the Yankees have performed as a unit this last, I think they're the best team in baseball since like August 11th. But also just how he's performed as well. He's earned it. It's not, a lot of teams are going to start to get into the scary, how do we piece together a third starters? The Yankees don't have that problem. So credit to him. And that just makes the Yankees a little more dangerous in these longer series. If you have more than Fried and Rodon, if you don't have to go with like a pitching chaos or a bullpen game, you're just going to be a stronger team overall. You're going to give yourself a bigger margin for error.
Yeah, this is one of the weaker Yankee bullpens that they've had. I mean, I like Bednar, but they have some soft spots in the pen. So it's good that they can move Luis Gil and Will Warren to the pen. I think that'll help them get through the middle innings. And Cam Schlittler's just been a revelation. I mean, just premium velo with great breaking balls. And I think I've been talking about this a little bit on the pod that, the advent of actually having 2 different fastballs, being able to separate those two, having a real 4-seam and a real 2-seam over the last few starts has been the kind of final touch. They're like, all right, he's ready to go.
Yeah, Schlittler has been phenomenal for them so far. And the fact that we're not in a panic mode with the Yankees rotation sans Garrett Cole says a lot about how well some of those young guys have stepped up this year, and the health and effectiveness of Rodon behind Fried too, right? Like that was kind of a lingering question in past years this time of year as well. Beyond the playoffs, real quick, the manager carousel is spinning. So Bruce Bochy out in Texas. They mutually agreed to part ways. He was offered a different role to stay in an advisory capacity. The Giants fired Bob Melvin and the Twins fired Rocco Baldelli. The Pirates extended Don Kelly, which was 59 and 65 for taking over for Derek Shelton. He's a Pittsburgh guy. It makes sense. Like they probably found their manager. They got other stuff to figure out if they're going to be good. It's not going to be whether or not Don Kelly's the right fit. I think Don Kelly is the right fit.
There's a killer piece out there about the Pirates and just quoting players about, didn't seem like there was a plan. And like, oh my God, it's devastating. Check your Slack. I've slacked it to you.
Really?
Me too? I'll send it to you too. I mean, it's just, there's some interesting quotes in there. They've got some issues to deal with. And I think that there will be some changes I don't know if it's all the way at the top in the front office because he's, been signed for a while, but there's a little bit of angst there, and the players are feeling it. They did not like how this year went down.
Somebody sent me a video of Travis Williams talking about their decisions to keep everything, and it was just like not the most confidence-inspiring video. I think people are a little surprised, but as we meant, and you know what, Derek, you mentioned the ones that already decided. We're gonna have at least 2 more because the Orioles are conducting a search. Whether or not they keep Tony Mansolino, who was their interim. They're still going to do the search process. Miguel Cairo in DC, same thing. Mm-hmm. They're going to at least search, so you could have even more openings there. And then, of course, if any of these teams, could we see any? I don't think, I was looking at this today, with these teams in the playoffs, if anyone exits early, I don't think we're going to see anything. I mean, Boone and Dave Roberts just got extended, and those are like the most trigger-happy fan bases. Like, if the Brewers get swept out and lose early, Pat Murphy's going nowhere. Craig Counsell's going nowhere. That's what I mean. Like Terry Francona, like, dude, they're probably in this because of Terry Francona. So I was looking at it today. I don't think there's going to be any more movement post-mortem of the playoffs, but there could be some more movement here now. We haven't heard anything from the Angels, right? What happened to Ron Washington?
There's Ron Washington has sort of affirmed that he'd want to do it and he's healthy, but
right. Could be another. We moved him to an advisory role. Bochy's 71. Wash is around that age, right? Might be a little older. Yeah. And Snicker, which is like, I saw Atlanta people a few weeks ago. Nobody knows what that guy's doing yet. And so they're kind of held hostage by this because they're going to defer to him, which is kind of interesting that they're not just having a little meeting and just going to figure out, like, maybe we should, I don't know. I don't think he wants to go out like this. People close to him weren't even sure what he was doing. But that's another, if that job opens up, that immediately becomes, I think, the best manager gig in baseball.
Yeah, of those open ones, I think that'd be number one. Orioles would probably be two out of that group.
Giants is up there.
If the Twins were actively trying to get better right now, you could make a case for them. I think it's the worst of the current ones, just because they're stuck. They're in limbo right now. They're kind of in
the Rockies. Oh no,
the Rockies is always the hardest, worst job for a manager. Like, it just is by default. Rangers versus Giants is a little more of a toss up. Like, if they were if the same candidate was interested in both, they were trying to pursue the same candidate, and it came down to that person just choosing which opening do you think you'd choose between the Rangers and Giants right now, based on the direction of those two franchises.
If I could choose my hitting coach, I might choose the Rangers, because I feel like the Rangers' downfall this year was mostly in the hitting side. Now, the weird thing is, if I could choose my hitting coach, I might choose Donnie Ecker. So that'd be a little bit weird.
That'd be weird.
I don't think that management's beaten down the doorway to interview me for that job if I'm saying I'm bringing Donnie with me. But, it's just, I think that the other thing that's interesting about both of these is they'll spend money, but they're also both near the top of that spending money already.
Right.
So they're not necessarily, they don't have a lot more to spend. They've proven that they will spend, but they've kind of already spent. So there'll be a lot of pressure if you take those jobs to be the person that takes them over the mountaintop, like to be you to be it, and not to be the players that we're bringing along. So,
but the Rangers just won, so it's not like their fan base is like starved. I would pick the Rangers. I think Buster Posey's still a very inexperienced, unproven head of baseball operations.
And he's weirdly bulletproof. It's a weird situation where,
yes,
but that might be a reason to take the job. You know that your manager, that nobody can fire your president of baseball operations because he's part of the ownership group. That's a little weird.
But you'd be the one who would wear it if they
you'd be the one who'd wear it. Yeah.
So I like what Chris Young is doing over there. I think people who work with him love him. He's a good mix of played, but is into the data side of things. I would go Texas, but also, are we talking about Skip Schumacher? Because he may have to make this decision. He's been in the wings waiting for this transition. Right, he went to Texas with the idea that he would be their next manager. Somebody told me that he has a kid that goes to TCU. That may also factor into wanting to be in that area, right? Yep. So I don't know. I feel like that's probably going to end up what happens, unless Skip Schumacher, and I don't know, has a secret affinity for always wanting to manage the San Francisco Giants. It feels like Skip Schumacher can pick his next destination if it's not, in fact, the Texas Rangers.
Yeah, he's been a guy in waiting.
The top guy.
While. Yeah.
Seems like the buzzy candidate.
What's that?
Seems like the buzzy candidate right now.
Yeah. We've talked about having a player smushing machine. If you could have a coach smushing machine, I think that the Giants would pick a Kapler Melvin smush. Yeah. Where you're taking Kapler's innovation and pregame strategies and the stuff that he did on the field before the games and the really innovative stuff that he did with his staff, and then you're taking Melvin's affability and ability to connect with people and his sort of calm nature. If you could take those two things and put them together, you would have the next candidate for the Giants, I think.
Yeah, I've heard Nick Hundley's name come up. Don't know how realistic that actually is, but one possible name to keep an eye on as the Giants try to fill that opening. But we'll see. I just to weigh in quickly, I think the Giants is the more challenging job because you have the Dodgers to deal with every single year. in division. The Padres still very good right now. Arizona's not going away. I think winning in the AL West for the next few years looks a little bit easier when you consider how these teams spend, where they're at right now. Maybe a little more young talent that you like in Texas also could be the other thing. You get Wyatt Langford maybe as a cornerstone, as a younger guy that's not on a massive contract too. So small things, but I think that makes the Rangers' job just a little bit more appealing if the main goal is winning. Even though I love Northern California, as you guys know. So we are going to go. The games are getting underway. Hopefully our predictions haven't aged too terribly. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. Enjoy day 1 of wild card action. We're back with you on Wednesday.
Aging like sushi. Thanks for listening.